Are we recording?
3, 2, 1, and we're live. Bedroom super producers around the world, welcome back to your podcast where we discuss the latest and greatest in gear, trends, all music styles based on computers that you can produce when you chill out in the bedroom, in the basement, or wherever your home studio is. We are your hosts. I'm JT.
I'm BK.
And today we want to talk about something that will certainly ruffle some feathers, but we do not care. It needs to be talked about, especially for old heads like us. And it is around the question, is trap killing hip hop? BK, I got a question for you. Is the current state of urban music, I'm talking about rap, R&B, compromised by all of these songs that now sound all the same, sound like trap music with the big bass? I think they call it the 808, the rattling snares.
Well, it depends how you see it.
Hi-hats. And then you've got the lazy flows.
So basically we're asking the question, is trap music everywhere?
Well, I think it is.
Is there too much trap music?
Yeah, exactly. Is there too much trap music? That's a better frame for the question.
Good question. First, I think these days trap music is so popular that it's totally normal that mainstream is gonna latch onto it. So for me, I'm not surprised. I think Rihanna has trap in her songs now. Drake does it. Even Miley Cyrus has a little bit of trap in her songs these days. So
true that. 23
right?
was a banger.
Right?
Hey,
Katy Perry.
Does Britney have a trap song? I don't think she's on the bandwagon yet.
I don't think so.
No.
But
you're right. I guess that the same happened to EDM a few years ago. And it's just the normal state of affair that whatever's hot at the moment, everybody's going to just...
Exactly. I think even Apple commercials now have trap music in it.
Really interesting.
Right?
What product? I'll check them out on Google,
at some
YouTube.
Point. But like I said, it's mainstream latches on to what's popular. And it seems that trap music seems to have gotten to that level where it used to be rap. Now it's the trap of rap, as I like to call it.
So if we look at the history a bit of the movement, when we got acquainted with this style, the 808s and the little 808 snares, the rattlesnake hi-hats, the slower tempos, we used to call that Southern hip-hop.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Well, everything under Atlanta, basically, right?
Right.
Because it started there.
The dirty.
The dirty. Yeah.
And I don't know, but I feel like it's been a while now. Like, let's think in terms of like UGK. The first time they were presented to the world on this song by Jay-Z called Big Pimpin'.
That was what year?
Oh, good question. Let me bring that up real quick. My point is, we had never really heard of any, Houston rap groups. If you were...
We were listening back then to Pow Wow and those guys from Texas.
Already?
Yeah, in 2003, 2004, trap started, beginning was 2000 something. And it became popular more 2010.
So Big Pimpin' was released in 1999.
So yeah, it was starting.
The way I remember it, I started to listen to rap around 94. So 5 years later, after the golden era pretty much ended, Southern artists became more mainstream. So it's been roughly 20 years now
Yeah. Well, like the
that Southern hip hop is moving on up. And basically, would you say, I mean, the early 2000s were still not quite yet trap.
it was starting
You
the
had a lot of Southern hip hop artists,
yeah,
but
but
the beats weren't.
influences the beats weren't
You had
quite
Three
there.
Six Mafia, who
Yeah.
were already pretty
Yeah.
hardcore with the 808s.
Yeah, but yeah, it was starting. I think that it was the seeds were in 2000 something, and then I think the big boom was like 2009, 2010, Ti. Like
And then just a little bit after that, Drake.
that's
And
when it started to become super popular, and people started really associating that with basically rap. It
right,
became
right.
right because before there were like it was like hardcore rap and trap, and like there was the like purists didn't like the whole trap stuff,
Exactly.
right? And
Exactly. And we come from more of
well,
an East Coast background.
yeah, well, depends. Like I've always like, well, East Coast up north more, since we're from the cold, we identify more to these rough beats
Exactly.
from the East Coast, less from the West Coast. But I think for trap, the main difference would be that in rap, you're talking more about sample based and more coming from real instruments, and you want to emulate the best as possible the real stuff coming from records and everything. And trap, they just went all out, and it was basically doing music with what you had,
Like analog
like from the
drum
808.
machines
Yeah, from the 808. Because basically,
and then synthesizers, I
like
guess.
for us, as for me, the story that like I remember is mostly kind of like the TB 303.
Right.
The TB 303 from Roland was like a flop. It was supposed to sound like a bass, but it didn't.
Yeah.
So people hated it, and they started selling it at pawn shops, and it became this Detroit like signature sound because that was the only thing that starting musician could afford. Same thing for the 808. The 808 was supposed to be this like super drum machine and emulate super sound, but it was basically a drum synth. So it was like it was analog drums basically.
Yeah. Nobody really thought it sounded like a drum set.
Exactly.
Right.
So it came out, they tried to sell it, doesn't work out, then it goes to pawn shops.
Well, you see, that's really interesting, the point you're making, because I was listening to East Coast hip hop, obviously, loving the sampled sound. And everything that came from the South in the beginning, I was like,
Well, it was quirky. It was kind of like we were talking.
yeah, it sounded cheap.
Yeah, we were talking about Timberland last week.
It wasn't very, very
like quacky.
polished. The arrangements, like the melodies and all that, were kind of simple,
but
simplistic.
It was
even.
starting. It was like non-musicians trying to use whatever came in hand to make music.
And I guess that's the trap sound to a certain
That's
extent,
how it
like
started.
the raw energy again.
Exactly,
And
that's how it
the
started.
simplicity.
And in a way, it became more open than hip hop. Hip hop, well, not hip hop, more rap. Because for me, rap and trap is still under hip hop. But anyway, I don't know. We could discuss it forever. But in a way, the fact that they used analog drum machines and synth, trap became more open to experimenting.
True.
The sound was more, you were going to have these quirky synth in there. In normal rap, no, it has to sound like a bass. It has to sound like a snare. You're going to sample a real kick drum. So in a way, for me, the fun thing about trap is that it kind of sounds like the future.
True.
That's what I like about it.
Man, you just explained in a few seconds why I've been a hater for so long. And by the way, to all our listeners, I'm a big fan now, but it took me roughly 10 to 15 years to get around the fact that it sounded different and it wasn't what I would have called like in the beginning hip hop music. But okay, so let's move on to um, some new styles because again, as we've seen, it started out as Southern or Dirty South hip hop. And now there are some new artists emerging. And if I were to play some of those records, and I'm talking some of the new artists like Smoke Burp, The Baby, and even the Murda Beats solo stuff, they have these incredibly distorted songs, and it's like they basically bounce their tracks at plus 12 dBs on the master out and put it out like that on Spotify. And at first, again, I was talking with my bro, and he obviously hates it. And I was just mesmerized that this came out, but it seems like to be a trend that people really dig. So what do you make of that?
Um, I think if you look at it like through a producer's eyes, you're gonna say it sounds bad, it sounds distorted. How can they be doing this? It doesn't sound good, doesn't sound polished.
Like it's not even mixtape ready. You know what I mean? Like it's even worse than.
But like at the same time, if you look at it just, let's say, from someone who doesn't know music, who doesn't listen to every single clap in a song, who tweaks every knob, in a way, they're just trying to be creative. They're trying to go somewhere that it hasn't been. Because if you look at it, like, frankly, trap is it's pretty basic if you think about it. You've got those stuttering hi-hat, you've got that big 808, you've got that crisp snare, a melody on top, and that's it. So if you want to push the envelope, what do you do? Well, maybe you're going to put a filter on the drums. Maybe you're going to put some distortion on the kick drum. So they're trying something else in a way. So for me, there's nothing wrong with it. It's kind of like what I was thinking earlier today was, it's kind of like listening to a guitar, like a classical guitar, and then listening to a guitar with distortion or listening to grunge music. Totally different things. And some purists are going to say, well, no, it's the classical guitar that's the real sound. And then Van Halen's going to say, no, I need distortion. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it depends. It's timing. It's people try stuff, and yes, it sounds bad, but if it's creative, art is supposed to be creative, and you're supposed to try stuff. And maybe even if it sucks at the beginning, why not?
I think that's a great point again, because for many years now, we've been very conservative when it came to mixing and mastering. Like there were those ultra rigid rules that you
I was doing the same thing.
possibly break. You remember when we put out the first albums, when we produced rap records, the people were adamant that we had to go to a certain mastering house to get the masters done, because you could not in your right mind do your own home master and put that music out. And guess what? Nowadays, the biggest DJs on earth put out their own masters and nobody gives a damn.
It doesn't mean that it sounds good. If you look at it like technically speaking, if you listen to those records in like a super soundproof studio or a real mastering, it doesn't mean it's going to sound awesome. But in terms of the creative energy, why not?
Yeah, I mean, again, it was a tough pill to swallow at first, but now I kind of like that raw energy and the fact that
It's
the whole
different.
master distorts on the kicks and on the 808s particularly. I mean, I think it's genius to a certain extent,
You do something
because
else.
you completely changed the rules, and that, I think, especially us as bedroom producers who are more limited, we need to be able to explore ways to counter the fact that we don't have $1,000 to get a master done. And maybe it also helps, new artists, set themselves apart in a way.
Exactly. Like for me, like I said, for me, creativity is more important than having the best sound. You can have the best sound ever, the best studio, the best plugins, and your music can still be crap.
True.
Or you can have a not so good sound laptop, normal sound card, but have like a super vibe, super energy. Say you're not overplaying, you haven't recorded 50 times in a row, you did it 5 times, 6 times.
I think
The energy is good.
yeah, exactly. And I was hearing you talk about energy and vibe. A great example of that is the new Timbo. We talked about Timbo last week, and I was kind of hating a bit on the new Timbo, but actually, I gotta say, the new videos that he puts out on Instagram, where he basically overdrives his smartphone's input like 10 times, makes the beat sound crazy good.
Mm,
Like as anytime a kick drum or a snare drum hits, the whole thing basically distorts
exactly. It doesn't
to
sound perfect.
oblivion. And then I just think that that new aesthetic, and I'm sure he does it on purpose, like he pretty much places the smartphone right next to the speaker so it rumbles as much as it can.
Today it's about energy, honestly. Uh, let's not mistake energy and creativity with like half-assing our job and not mixing and not mastering it properly, but sometimes just to experiment, why not?
Yeah, well, like you said, if you keep it creative in a way and it's just not gratuitous too much, I think it actually helps, make the whole genre evolve.
Exactly, it becomes something else. That's what I
Maybe
that's
at
what I
some
like.
point we'll have vocals on the left and drums on the right,
We'll
like in the
see.
good old days. In the
We'll
like,
see.
was it in the 50s or something? They did that. All right, so moving on. Let's talk about the artists and the rappers and the flows, because again, I'm an old head. I am not ashamed to say it, but at some point I felt like every goddamn rapper out there had the same flow. There used to be a time in hip hop where your flow was all you had. It was like your trademark, your brand. And now, like Snoop Dogg a few years ago on his like YouTube show, laughed at the guys who all did, and now everybody does it, and
Exactly.
it's like a rule. It's like an unwritten rule that you kind of have to flow like that somehow.
Well, you don't have to, but it seems to be what's working right now. It seems to be what people like hearing. Um, Personally, I'm not necessarily a big fan of flows like that. If you hear it once, it's fine. Twice, 3 times, 4 times at some point, change it up. For me, it's not necessarily just the flow, my problem. It's also if you can't understand the words, it's kind of difficult.
Right,
The
because
words are repetitive.
I was going to ask, what do you make of mumble rap then?
Yeah, but that's the thing. Mumble rap, I'm not against it, but if it doesn't mean anything, you kind of the point of the point of hip hop music, of rap, was fairly centered around the words, around the lyrics, around basically the poetry.
Yes,
I think there's the word poetry even in trap. So, right?
I think so. I mean, if we go back to
So,
the elements, the founding pillars of hip hop, you needed to be a master of ceremony and therefore be entertaining the way you rap.
so if you're going to be mumbling and you're going to be repeating stuff that's mumbled that we don't understand, it's kind of difficult. At the same time, if I take the other side of the coin, for me, there's a big part of trap music that's built around it's a party
Yes,
because it comes from bounce. It comes from Miami. It comes from it's party.
Jamaica, the little
It's a party. Let's say Little
corner
John.
parties. Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah. That's
lyrics
true.
aren't
That's true.
aren't like super deep or anything, but it's a party.
I tend to
So
forget that. It's very
so in
true.
a way, people are looking for lyrical content when it's a party. You want a phrase, you want a couple of words that you can repeat, that you can remember super fast. So in a way, it's normal that it's not really deep, but at the same time, you don't want it to be just mumbling. But I can understand the fact that it's a little bit that way. So it's not the lyrical content. They're just trying to create a vibe. So in a way, they're using the voice almost as an instrument to
Yeah,
create a special vibe, a special energy, to get people bouncing, to get people
it's almost like
crunking, to
a.
get. So it's not like, for me, it's kind of like rap is super serious. It's this, it has a message, it has this and that. And trap can have a fun side, a party side, a bounce side, a booty bounce style. So that's the way I accept the fact that sometimes I don't understand the lyrics, or that it's mumbled, or
I think that you're right. Like if we take the analogy of a synthesizer, if you put too much glide on a sound, that's basically what they're doing with their voice. They're slurring from word to word. I mean, at first
sometimes they're
again,
slurring because of other things, not the glide.
we are not going to talk about that.
Okay.
I mean, we know what they do
What they do
behind closed
behind
doors.
closed doors.
Very good point. All right, so let's move on to something I always like to think about, because when we talked about the fact that hip hop was built on samples, and now we see all of this current trend towards creating samples. So my question to you is, do you think that in 20 to 30 years we're going to sample old trap records?
Very good question. Usually I would say that if it was rap, we were probably going to sample it because we would still like the samples that they used.
Yeah,
And it's happened to us too,
of course.
that we sampled someone who sampled something else.
A la DJ Khaled.
Exactly. Or for trap, honestly, I don't know, because you can use anything as a sample source. If you're creative enough, you can use anything. And you have to admit that trap today really has its own sound. So maybe you want to sample a little bit of that mumbling voice. Maybe you want to sample that like offset keyboard with that mumbling voice. So why not? For me, you can sample pretty much anything. You can sample a car in the street. You can sample a truck. Are we going to sample it the same way that rap sampled old jazz records, old blues records? Probably not. It's not going to be the same type of sampling. It's not going to be just like a big loop of a melody over a drum beat. It might be something a little bit more creative, that like snippets to create another instrument or something like that.
Yeah.
For me, that's what I would do.
All right. Well, for me, I mean, since those tape emulation plugins have been put out on the market and they sounded good, like the first one didn't really do it for me. They didn't sound analog, but the new ones, obviously the RC20 being my current favorite. Have you seen, by the way, that Waves Factory came out with a new plugin called, I think, Cassette? And it's basically a bunch of different types of cassette decks, and you basically put your mix through the whole thing. It's really really cool. I think we should get that.
It's funny how before we were fighting not to have that
Yeah.
noise reduction on everything, and
Yes.
now we're fighting to put back that noise.
Man, I honestly, when young producers started to destroy their synths with those kinds of plugins, is when I actually fell in love with trap. Because I know for the past half hour I sounded like a hater, but I'm actually such a big fan now, because you can actually take any cheap sounding synth and make it so cool, that I think that right now we're in a golden age. I actually think that what's being done right now will define many, many generations to come, just because of the fact that even if you just have $1,000 computer with a bunch of cracked soft synths, you can actually make something absolutely,
Yeah.
genre defining, just with a little bit of creativity, a little bit of knowledge, musical knowledge. So I definitely think that we will hear samples in the future. Time will tell, but
We'll see. Yeah.
and all right. So moving on, hip hop has been pronounced dead so many times now that and it's been brought back to life several times also. So I think in your mind, in your opinion, is rap, hip hop more alive than ever, or is it not getting creative enough anymore and it's stagnant? What do you think?
Um, if you're looking for old hip hop music, old rap from the 90s, of course you're going to say it's dead. If you're looking at the whole cultural impact it's had and it's still having, I'm going to say no. Because first of all, trap is super popular. Trap is part of hip hop, right?
I would say so. Absolutely.
You still hear, like I said earlier, trap, rap in many commercials. The culture's still there. Graffiti's still there. Everything is still there and it keeps evolving.
The clothes, the
The
dancing.
clothing and everything. So, in a way, it's just changing. And if it would have stayed the same, that wouldn't have been good either. It has to change, and it's, for me, it's in constant evolution, because now you have hip hop and country songs.
Yes.
You
Yes.
have,
Who would have thought?
right? We, like we said earlier, you have trap by Miley Cyrus. You have Katy Perry singing over a trap song. Like, you can't say that hip hop is dead, because it's just changing,
Right, right.
right?
And you made me think about another undercurrent that's really interesting. My brother sent me a few songs through
We should have him on the
Spotify.
podcast.
Absolutely,
Right?
He'll have to come really soon.
Because you always talk about him.
Oh yeah, for
He's a
sure.
reference.
Well, he's one of the biggest hip hop nerds I know.
Yeah.
So obviously he helps me surf the currents.
Louis, you're coming on the podcast, man.
And basically he listens to this golden era hip hop that is made today, and
That's made today?
yeah, and they call it true school, I think.
Okay. Wow.
They call it true school, and there aren't any samples nowadays. Those producer DJs, they hire musicians, and they basically recreate samples also, but with real musicians, the way the old songs that were sampled in the golden era were produced, which I find fascinating also. So we should probably have him on the podcast to have a segment on true school hip hop. But basically, true school is now like for the hardcores, like the super savvy fans, whereas trap has become the pop of hip hop, like the very mainstream, very popular.
But that's also an evolution.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
at some point, it started sampling, then we started redoing samples, right? Because with all the clearance and all the lawsuits and everything, so there was these guys who were redoing samples, and now people are just playing the music and sampling from real musicians and real orchestras and real drums. So that's also evolution in a way. Even if you're doing what was done 20 years ago, the way you do it is different. So you're still evolving in a way.
Yeah, and I like this idea of evolution, and I'd like to close out this very, very deep and difficult discussion, because I know, especially on YouTube, that a lot of people are going to have their opinion, and that's perfectly fine. I can't wait to hear you guys. But so would you say that the whole dominance of the trap sound right now is helping modern music?
Um, I'm gonna say yes. Why? Because it. Who would have thought that you would have heard a hip hop artist or a trap artist on a country record, right? No one,
I wouldn't.
right? Who would have thought that there would be featuring from, I don't know, emo bands with pop bands, and now I think everyone has a trap remix of their song, be it pop, be it Katy Perry, be it whatever. So
Yeah, you got to
and
have the Migos on there
right,
somehow.
exactly. So everyone wants someone to rap. Everyone wants some of those stuttered hi hats. So in a way, it's uniting everyone. It's creating like cross genres. So I don't see why that's bad. I think
Yeah, I mean,
people who want to segregate stuff, country is country, pop is pop. Who says what is what? It's music, and if you make a great track with a hip hop artist or with a rap artist, and it has a guitar or it has a country swing to it, or why not? So for me,
throw
it's perfect. Like,
throw an 808 on it. I'm listening.
oh, it sounds good, right? It bounces. We like the bounce.
Exactly. Very interesting, BK. I mean, you helped me self-reflect on these mental walls that I build for myself, and I think that, like you say, we are in a very interesting era where there are no rules. You can mix and match any artist, any genre, any styles of production and mixing, and it feels like we're freer than ever.
Of course. And the fact that you can do it in your home studio, that you're not going to have a studio exec or someone telling you that you need to be making this type of music and this type of music, and they don't want to invest in this type of music. That also
Make it
helps.
louder.
Because right now, basically all the trends start in someone's basement, in someone's room,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then someone at the top notices and is like, oh, yeah, now we can make some money with that.
And then it becomes accepted to just
Exactly.
use a
So,
cheap piece of software, cheap laptop. It sounds bad, but this is the sound.
right? So it's good, it's bad at the same time. It's got its good points, bad points. For me overall, I think it's positive to have everything mixed together.
And by the way, if you're wondering, BK has been playing in metal bands for like 10 to 15 years. So I applaud your open mindedness. It's beautiful. All right. So, where can people find us if they like the podcast and they want to support the show?
YouTube, delicatebeats.com. You can check out our products also on the Delicate Beats website. You want some serum, you want some contact stuff.
Do we have some new trap library for contact coming
I
out
don't
soon?
know. I think we have something. It's called
I think it's called Black Diamonds
Black
2.
Diamonds 2. That's right.
Coming out tomorrow. So if you want to take advantage of the incredible deal that we're giving to you guys when we launch, it's going to last 72 hours. The weekend is coming your way. If you need some new trap sounds, you know where to find them. So on this note, ladies, gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Bedroom Super Producer podcast. We always appreciate your input. If you want to comment on YouTube, find us. And on this note, we wish you a very, very productive, creative day.
Peace out.
Na 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 na.